Welcome to Your Hell Yes Life, the podcast that celebrates women who are following their yes and living life on their own terms. I'm your host, Zaya B., best-selling author, artist, explorer, and cheerleader for women tossing should to the curb. With each episode, I'll bring you inspiring stories and practical tips from brave, bold women. So tune in, get ready, and let's trailblaze your Hell Yes Life. Here we are laughing and having a blast already, so join the party and welcome to Your Hell Yes Life. I am Zaya B., your host, and I'm joined today with Suzanne Jabour. We are actually diving into grief. Now, before you turn off and say, grief can't possibly be something that I want to listen to, I'm going to ask that you be patient, tune in, and get a different perspective, because grief is part of life. And it's even part of your life when you may not even realize it's part of your life.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to start with what may seem like an odd question. We learned the word grief when we're very young. It's a very basic word. We probably had it in a spelling bee. And yet it's a huge topic. And the idea of grief, the way you and I talk about it, is broader than what other people may be thinking. So to level set everybody, can you start us off by defining grief?
Absolutely. And I love that we're starting there, because when I talk to people, they say, oh, well, but grief is just when you've lost a loved one. And what I would say is grief is a normal and natural response to all kinds of loss.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I appreciate you saying that. And I'll give an example so that we can expand it a little bit. And I'll share some personal stuff. So I am menopausal. Welcome to the next chapter. And it just took me by surprise one day. I was driving and I found myself crying. I don't have kids. I never had a huge desire to have kids. But all of a sudden, I realized that chapter is done. In this lifetime, I will not have my own children. I will not be able to birth children. And just losing that as a possibility and really having to say, okay, I'm also not young anymore, right? Young is, it's a perception. But, you know, my true youthful, fertile years are done. And we talk about hot flashes and we talk about mood swings. And I don't think I've ever heard about anybody talking about that grief of identity and possibility. And so it surprised me. And I don't know that I've actually talked about it to many people since. So why not just broadcast it to everybody now?
Right? Go big.
And so I think that's just one example of loss is loss. I mean, and I'm not going to compare that to the death of a son. I'm not silly, but it's still loss. And it's something we're experiencing, and we don't need to shrink it and say, well, it's not death, so I should just carry on.
Yeah. And it's so interesting that you frame it that way, because that's one of the things I really struggle with. And I talk about often is this strange kind of hierarchy, or like we're also grief phobic and grief illiterate and grief uncomfortable. We don't really want to talk about it at all. But if we're going to, it's like you kind of have to earn it. And so, yes, I lost a child. So that gives me a lot of acceptance that I should have grief. But the flips to like any kind of hierarchical nature of it, are you saying, well, but like it's not the same. So I don't want to equate the two things, but the emotion is the same. The things that happen to us are the same. The consequences are the same. So yes, there is a scale. But it's not a scale that we can quantify by the title of the loss or the relationship with the loss, because it's going to be different for every person. And the other thing, to me, the big negative of it is if you think about me as being like the one who won the hierarchy, right? The loss of a child for whatever reason is rated very highly as something you should grieve. So I did really well in that scoring. Yay. Like that doesn't help me any. But the other thing that I found really happened is, even as I am now a grief educator and I talk about grief literally for a living, I will have friends and family say to me, oh, well, no, but I don't want to talk to you about that because like your loss is so big and my loss is nothing. So instead of creating connection through grief, which is what I talk about all the time, we're further isolating ourselves because we're like self-selecting out of a conversation that really is rich and really binds us together in a unique way. Because we're sharing vulnerabilities, we're sharing the messiness of real life. We're not curating everything and making it Insta-worthy. And that's where our real connections are. So that whole sense of, I felt this grief, but I haven't even really shared it with anybody because I almost feel badly that I feel grief about this thing that wasn't the loss of a person. Like we're in so much bad swirl and story made up baloney about grief and how it works that it's maddening to me. So grieve it. You have to grieve that loss. It's the loss of something you thought was possible, even though you didn't want it. It's the loss of really the way we're valued in society? Like society tells us we're supposed to be young and beautiful. We're not supposed to be menopausal and sweaty, right? We're just not. We're supposed to cover that all up with powder and like special garments and like all the things like baloney. But we need to grieve those things. And even change that's positive has loss attached to it. That's a real tangle for people. They're like, oh, but I'm doing this new amazing thing, but you still lost something to be able to do it. So it's okay to grieve that thing and be excited about this thing at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. My career for 25 years was in change management and helping people with change. And that was part of it is the next thing may be really exciting. Like, let's say it's a new relationship and you love it, but you're also letting go of the full freedom that you have as a single person. The idea that you can choose what to do all the time because you don't have to compromise, right? So there is that letting go. And I'm really glad you brought that up because it's, again, something that probably surprises us. We think we should just jump in and this is great and therefore I should only have great feelings.
That's not how feelings work. It's just not. I was going to say, it just struck me. It makes me think of those. There's a series of little kids' books that are like Little Miss Angry and Little Miss Happy and Little Mr. Grumpy and whatever it is. And it's almost like we think that that's how emotions work, like that we switch from being like Little Miss one thing to Little Miss the other thing to like we can only have one at a time. And in fact, they're just all this big, messy tapestry of all the feelings all the time.
Yeah. So I want to ask you about how it fits into Hell Yes, but we'll come back to that. I am curious, since you've brought up these emotions, what is your perspective on how the emotions happen and how we make sense of a swirl?
So for me, literally as a matter of survival, I had to choose to be conscious. So that's what I encourage people to do. We are really conditioned, especially in Western cultures, to ignore most emotions, especially the ones that can't be on a greeting card, like joy and happy and congratulations. Like we have this weird paradigm of good emotions and bad emotions, which I think is wildly problematic. Because all emotions are valuable. All emotions have something to teach us. All emotions need to be felt. All emotions need to be moved. So for me, and I'm sure we'll get to, how I became a grief educator, but for me in the early days of my most recent loss, when it was this swirl of like all the emotions all the time, I knew I was only going to survive it by feeling them all. I'm an A+ student at problem solving. Give me your problem. Let's make a plan. Let's execute the plan. Done. Move on. Like I'm an A+ student that excelled in systems because I could figure out the system, play the game, check the boxes. Excellent. Feel all the emotions. Way out of my comfort zone. Certainly something I had been working on for years, but I wasn't ready for that level. And I knew that old way of kind of stuffing things and putting things in a box and denying those emotions, that would burst me to pieces. Like I literally had this visual in my head. You see it most in cartoons or in really kind of campy movies where the opera singer sings that note and like the glass shatters. That's the vision I had of what was going to happen to me if I didn't allow all the emotions to be felt. And I think that's also where we often get stuck in grief. Because when I'm talking to grievers or I'm reading someone's grief share, often the thought is, if I allow all those emotions, I will get stuck in them. And they're all the ones from the bad list, right? Despair, pain, sorrow, sadness, fear, anger, anxiety. Like it's nothing from the good list is happening at the moment. And people worry that if they allow those to all happen, they'll get stuck in them. And the reality is, if we allow all of them to happen, we can flow through them. They will flow through us and they will change. And it is that swirl, right? It's a constant, ever-changing swirl. But if you don't allow them, if you deny them, you get stuck. It's a lot of energy to deny big emotions. It's a lot of energy to hold those at bay. And that's where we get stuck. So what I would say about emotions is we have to allow them all.
Yeah. And I think the other part, and I had this, is not only getting stuck, but those big emotions also feel like they will consume you and you will, you just won't even, almost you'll cease to exist. But I know this, again, may sound like a little bit of a silly question, like the defining grief, but there are a lot of people who are not used to feeling their feelings, especially in the US, where it's just plug ahead, watch TV, go shopping, do whatever you need to do, but do not feel those, as you said, those bad, uncomfortable feelings.
Yeah.
And so they may be numb to some of them, or they may not know what to even do. Now, not that there's something to do per se, but how to allow them. Can you explain a little bit of like, what does that mean? What could somebody do to actually allow these emotions to go through?
So there's a couple of things that I recommend to people. One is that we have to be really honest with ourselves about our level of emotional intelligence, right? And how much we're even able to name them, right? So a lot of us get stuck at sort of what I call the mad, sad, glad trifecta. We know those words. We know maybe angry, we know happy, we know joy because we're being told we should feel joy. But we don't know the nuanced words. So there's a couple of things you can do which are really easy. One is go to Google. Dr. Google knows everything. Google University will find you an emotions wheel. And if you just type emotions wheel, feelings wheel, something like that, there's tons of them out there. That's a really great way to start to look at the nuances of the emotions, because the release of it is in the nuance. If you're stuck at I'm angry, there's no release there, because angry also is one of those emotions that's like the shielding emotion. That's not really what we're feeling. There's always something underneath, but we get stuck there because that's what we've been taught, right? We know angry, but the magic is under the angry. So if you get an emotions wheel, most of them are designed so you kind of can dig in. So you start at one and you go, okay, but what is that really? Oh, wait, tiredness is an emotion. There's all kinds of things on there that you will have never really maybe thought of as emotions. So that's really helpful. And then one of the things that I rely on is a great exercise from one of my brilliant mentors, Dr. Claire Zammit. And she has this wonderful exercise that helps you connect with yourself, which is a feeling and needs inventory. So you have this conversation, it's just with yourself. So if you don't want to be all public about your emotions like I choose to be, that's fine. It's a conversation with yourself. And you just ask yourself, how are you feeling? And you do that 3 times in a row. And all you do when you hear it. So I would say, Suzanne, how are you feeling? I'm feeling excited. Oh, I hear that you're feeling excited. You just reflect back and then ask again, because what that helps you to do is get to a more nuanced understanding of what the emotion really is. Because by the time you've asked 3 times, sometimes it takes me a real long time because I'll be scrambling to go, oh my gosh, what's the nuance? What's the deeper thing? I don't even know. Okay, wait, what? So it is a practice that you kind of have to work on the vocabulary and the naming of the things. By the time you get to the third one, I find you're really at the kernel of what's actually going on. And then you ask yourself what you need, because that's the release piece. What do you need? And that's where we can start to move that emotion. And to me, the most fascinating thing about it is the need is often very small. I need to go walk in nature. I need a nap. I need a cup of tea. I need to talk to a friend. I need to call somebody. I need to phone a friend, right? Sometimes I need chocolate, right? And that's okay. But the need is never anything you can't provide yourself, because you're connecting with what you need. And so often we're resourced beyond our imagining, and we can almost always provide that need. It's usually something very small. And then that starts to move that emotion. So you've gotten really more nuanced in your connection to them, and then you're filling the need, and then they get to move through.
Wow. That's beautiful. I mean, it seems like it's such a simple and yet powerful thing. And what came up to me also is that it's a great practice at any time, so that you are in touch with, well, what am I feeling and what do I need, so that you build more self-awareness, because that's a wonderful thing. And so that in times when there are bigger things going on, I won't say sadder or darker to your thing, but just bigger emotions where maybe you have more needs, you're already used to doing that practice. And it's not something you have to start learning then, because it is a practice. I would imagine that for some people that are not used to checking in with themselves, this will take a while. And so that's the other thing, is to be patient with yourself. It's not like, well, I can't feel anything, and so therefore I'm out. I'm going to just go on with my day. It's just slow down and sit with yourself a little bit longer and tune into your body. To me, that's where I get sense of my feelings is, oh, I feel some tightness. What's that tightness?
Yeah. And that's where they all are, right? That's the other reason I think in Western cultures, particularly in North America, we're not good at feeling those emotions, because we're good at being in our head. We're brilliant from the neck up, but ask us to go into our body and feel something. No, all I feel is my shoulders are earrings. And we don't stop to think, oh, what could that be about? I wonder. I have some curiosity about that, right? We just go, I don't know, I'm just stressed out. Okay, well, stressed out isn't really a thing, except we are all doing it. So it is that sense. And I think what you're saying is really brilliant too. This is part of why I think it's really important that people understand that grief happens for all kinds of loss. Because if we're practicing our skills and we're practicing connecting to ourselves and we're practicing languaging our feelings with a loss that's not as overwhelming, then when we get to the ones that are overwhelming, whatever they are, we have a little bit of confidence. We have a little bit of skills based in our toolbox that we can pull out when we have the capacity to do that, which in very early days, you don't, you just survive. But we get to the point where we think, no, like I had that other loss and this is what I did. And this is how I kind of helped me to think about it. And this is how I moved my body. And then we have those skills both around communicating and understanding ourselves that we can call upon when those more overwhelming griefs happen.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to go back to the question I mentioned a little bit earlier. As much as we're saying, yes, it's important to be in touch, to allow all those things, I think there are probably still people listening saying, yeah, and how is it part of a hell yes life? Because it still doesn't sound like fun, right?
Yeah.
And not to say that we need to your point, we don't always need to focus on fun as much as it's delightful. So can you share your perspective on how grief is part of a hell yes life?
So for me, maybe that's a good starting point. For me, a hell yes life is all of it. I can't have a hell yes life if I'm denying a huge part of my life.
Absolutely.
And so as a mother who had a child die, that's a huge event in my life. The grief was overwhelming, remains part of my everyday experience. And I'm also really clear that there is a life to be lived here and it's mine. And I won't let that terrible thing that happened be for nothing. And so that for me is part of a hell yes life. It's like, yes, this is part of my life. This is part of who I am. This is now part of my identity. And I'm also someone who is here on the planet to live as big, as rich, as full, as exciting, as all the things a life as I can. And that honors me. It honors my son. It models for my daughter. So that's why I think it's important that we really embrace it as part of a hell yes life.
Thank you. And I appreciate you sharing that because it's much easier for me to say, oh, of course we should have a hell yes life and everything's included. And then I could imagine somebody that has had a massive loss saying, well, but you don't understand. So yeah. You do understand, right? You went through it and you're saying that it is still possible to move on. And it sounds almost like you're saying not only possible, but it's important. Like you shouldn't be stopping your life at that point. Life does go on. And as long as you're alive, you may as well fully be in all of it.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that if you're someone who's, I don't know, if you have found this podcast and you're in those early days and you're full on in survival mode and you're thinking, woman, you are full of hooey balooey, that's okay. You're not supposed to feel that yet. You're not supposed to even understand that yet. Your brain is busy rewiring itself. Your body is in crisis. Just breathe. That's all you're supposed to be doing in those early acute days. Just breathe. One hard thing a day and breathe was our rule, right? Mm-hmm. And that phase doesn't last forever. And so then how do you integrate your loss? How do you move forward with your person? Like Ben is still a very vibrant part of my life, even though he's not physically here. You know, I think of him all the time. He's present in my life every moment of every day. He's literally a part of my body that's now no longer walking the planet. Of course, he's still part of my life. I'm not moving on and leaving him behind. Yeah. I'm moving with. I'm carrying him with me. And he didn't live a small life. So if I'm going to build a life that is a life he should have lived, it has to be a hell yes life.
That's so beautiful. Thank you so much for articulating that in such a way. It really just warms my heart, the idea of you carrying him with you and that he is part of it. And what a beautiful way to honor him, especially because you are living this big, bold, make a difference life, and he gets to experience that in a different way. Yeah. And so while we're on that, can you actually share how you went from this massive loss to creating a new path in life?
I mean, one baby step at a time. I am all about baby steps to success. In grief, there is no leaping. You are not going to Evel Knievel it across the Grand Canyon. You take baby steps across cracks in the sidewalk. It really is a series of small choices every day. And just being aware that I have to build something. I mean, when Ben died, I could literally see pieces of me and pieces of my life, like those big 3D puzzles they do on Survivor, those big chunky puzzle pieces. I could see those pieces like on the ground around me on the floor. And my arms were already full of all the pieces I could carry.
Mm.
So I had to make choices about how do I put this life back together? How do I put myself back together? Because I was never going to be, I was very clear instantly that I would never be the same person as I was before that happened. So I had to let her go and grieve her and figure out, who was I next? What was I next? How did I rebuild a life that honored him, honored me, allowed my daughter and I to keep having a great life? And to me, a great life, I don't want to make it sound all sunshine and lollipops, because it's not. It's hard. It's hard. A real life is hard.
Mm.
And that's okay. We can do hard things. Bless you, Glennon Doyle. Like, we said that probably 1,000 times a day. We would look at each other and go, we can do hard things. Okay. How do we feed ourselves? I think we call DoorDash. Like, is it DoorDash or Skip the Dishes or Uber Eats? I think we can decide between those three, and then we could find something to eat. Like, it's hard decisions, little choices every day to rebuild something and to figure out what the next thing is. Because the thing that you had, when you have a loss of someone that close to you, that's that integrated in your life, regardless of their title in your life, I want to be very clear about that. Mine happened to be a child. It could be a spouse. It could be a best friend. It could be a partner. Someone who's that entwined in your life and that intrinsic in your life, that life is gone because they're not there anymore. So you have to rebuild something new. And really, I got from there to here, one baby step, one small decision, learning about myself, learning about other people. And really, I talked about the conscious piece. The other half of the thing I realized was I had to be curious. And for me, I think that was the magic sauce, conscious and curious. So letting all the emotions just be, not denying any of them, which I'm not here to tell you that's easy. It's brutal and hard and requires a lot of curled up on the couch sobbing. That's okay. That's how grief works sometimes. And the curiosity in the early days was literally about, how do I get through this day? How do I just be awake long enough? And my daughter and I would look at each other at like 6:00 in the evening and be like, okay, is it okay if we go back to bed now? Like, is it socially acceptable for us to go back to bed? And I'm like, okay, I think we should try and stay up for another hour. Okay. And then we would just go back to bed. So it really was curiosity about, how do we just survive this? How do we get through these earliest, most acute, most awful days? And then my curiosity turned to wanting to understand grief better, wanting to understand why people I thought were my people didn't show up. Like, why is it accepted that grief changes your address book? That didn't make any sense to me, but that's what I was experiencing. So it really was about, how do I stay curious? How do I stay, even in the hardest moments? Really, I had moments of curiosity about, how do I stop sobbing so I could breathe?
Wow.
How do I do that? That's where the early curiosity is. And then it just kind of expanded from there to be, how do I build a life? How do I rebuild myself? Who am I even now? What do I care about? And how do you put that all together to be a life?
Wow. I mean, what you're sharing is making me realize that with these big losses, that there are so many other losses that are not small. The idea of who is a friend, and who can I lean on, right? So questioning all of that, and then potentially letting go of friends. Because to me, I honestly define friendship on the people that are there in the hard times. If they can only be there in the good times, that to me doesn't feel like a friend. So letting go of friends, letting go of your old identity, on top of obviously the massive loss of your son and of the person that somebody is losing. Yeah. But all of these other pieces are making me realize just how many layers of processing needs to go on, and that it isn't something we talk about. And so I really appreciate that you're bringing it up, because it's important, not just for anybody that is going through it, will go through it, but we're all going to be around somebody who's experiencing it. And so to understand it more, so that we can support the person in to your point earlier, what they need, not what's comfortable for us.
Right.
But, even ask, right? I don't, would you have responded well if somebody said, what do you need? Or
no,
was it more that so you need somebody to just give at that point?
What you need. So when we're talking about how we support someone, the offers have to be really specific.
Okay.
Because what people say so much, which is lovely, and I could just feel the energy of them wanting to help, because I also got to the point where I had to stop listening to the words people were saying, because sometimes they were so hurtful and awful, but their intention was good. So I had to just kind of lean into that. But what people say so much is, anything you need, just give me a call. I'm here for you. Or, variations on that. The problem with that in grief, and I suspect in pretty much any time you're in crisis and people are offering whatever you need, your brain can't conceptualize that. I can't come up with, I barely know how to breathe.
Mm.
So what I might need at some future date that I could remember a list of who offered, that's too many steps. So instead, something like, I'm going to the grocery store, go to your fridge, open it up and tell me what's missing, and I'll bring that to you this afternoon.
Mm.
Really specific offers. That I could do, right?
Okay.
Then I could say yes or no.
Right.
Right. Or so very specific. And I think if it's something you love to do anyway, offer that, or something you're doing anyway. So many of us are conditioned to not want to be a burden. So to phone somebody and say, oh, I really need this thing, like we feel badly. We're all entangled in that conditioning. But if you're doing it anyway, hey, I'm going to Home Depot today. I need yard waste bags. Do you need them? You know, whatever it is you're doing for yourself, all those practical things we do for ourselves without even thinking, the griever needs those too. I was talking to someone who had some neighborhood angel show up and do her laundry.
Mm.
She would come on Wednesday, pick up all the dirty linens, take them home, wash and fold, and bring them back the next day. And I was like, wait, somebody did your laundry? And I said to my daughter, do you even remember? Like, how did we do laundry? And we realized what we did is we bought extra socks and underwear. And that's how we did laundry. We were like, yeah, we need more socks and underwear because we can't manage laundry right now. But that kind of stuff. And even, you know, what if it's your neighbor who lost someone? So someone you don't know really well. What if you went and said, or you saw them and said, hey, it's garbage day on Thursdays. Would you be okay if I snuck into your backyard and grabbed your cans for you and put them out? Because that person probably doesn't even know when it's Thursday.
Right.
Like those early days, you don't even know what day it is.
I love these practical tips. Thank you so much. I want to go back to one other thing that you said, in that people would say things that are horrifically hurtful. So let's help people to not say those things. Can you share a little bit about what they said? Because you said they said them with good intent. And so I'm sure they just didn't know what to say.
Yeah. And that's a huge problem, right? That we don't know what to say. So what I say as an overall rule, and I say this in a bit of a sassy way because we have to lighten the conversation sometimes. If you heard your Aunt Mildred say it to your mother at your grandma's funeral, don't say it. Like, just don't say it. All those old cliches. And I wish my $1 billion gift to the world would be the one size fits all thing you could say. It doesn't exist because grief is broad and complicated and messy. If you can say something from your heart, that to me is the key. Think about what you want them to feel and say that. And I think too, we need to give ourselves permission to name what's true. I have no idea what to say. Your loss to me is incomprehensible, and I'm here for you. Do you just need me to listen? Can we go for a walk? What would serve you in this moment? You can't fix it. You can't make it better. You're not reminding them. That's critical for people to understand. I remember every second of every day that Ben has died. Nobody will ever remind me because I will never forget. The fact that you also remember and that something happened to remind you of him or you thought of him, that's a gift to me because I think of him all the time. So to know that his life had impact on other people too, that's a huge gift. It makes me well up every time. And it's okay for your emotions to come out your eyes. That's healthy. That's normal. That's part of a hell yes life. Because if I'm going to allow them all to be, sometimes they will leak out as water from my eyes. That's just the way that it works. What's really important to know is that we need to be really griever centered. So the other thing that people do because we want to connect with the person is we want to share our loss too. We want to share our story as a way to connect with each other. This is a tricky one, and it's going to depend on your relationship with the person. I think it's okay to say, I've experienced big losses too, and so I have a sense of what you're going through, and I want you to know that I'm here for you and all your emotions are okay with me. That would be helpful. To say, I know exactly what you're going through, or I've been through the same thing, that's not helpful. Even another mother who's lost a son in similar circumstances at a similar age has not had my exact experience. So for me, the mindset and the heart space always is, how do we create connection? Because we're all so isolated right now in weird, tangled ways. Connection is, I see you. Connection is, I care about you. Connection is, can I just sit with you? Connection is, that must be big. It must be big. Is there any piece of it I can take for you? I know exactly what's going on for you. I had the exact same thing happen. Can you feel how isolating that is? How immediately you want to go, ooh,
Yeah.
no, you don't. And the other, you want to lean in, right? So is it a lean in? Is it a lean away? Am I connecting? Am I isolating? That's always it for me.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing all that. And again, I think what's important to take away is that these are great for any loss, right? Even if it's a breakup, a divorce, loss of a job, anything, right? And just being there for that person.
Let's practice there. Because someone like me, I'm a grieving mother grieving out loud. I am not a good first assignment. This is not a good place to find out if you have emotional intelligence. It's not going to go well, right? And that's okay. But what if, like you're talking about the loss of a job, what if instead of saying, oh, well, it just means there's something out there better for you, like we all have this cheerleadery language, but we don't have really good language around acknowledging the emotion. What if you said, oh my gosh, like that was such a big part of your life and you had so many connections there and such a social circle and it gave so much rhythm to your life and you had financial security. That's a big loss. And that must be bringing up some stuff. What if we started there?
If you'll excuse me, I need to go reach out to somebody because I literally just said the wrong thing 2 days ago. Like,
oh, there is no wrong thing. And we can go back and say, I was thinking about that some more. And I realized that I really want to encourage you. And it's also okay for you to have big emotions with me. I'm a person you can have big emotions with.
Yeah. I so deeply appreciate that we're having this discussion around, first of all, a topic that people avoid and that can feel big and scary and sad and overwhelming and all of that. And you also bring an energy of ease to it. I won't say fun necessarily, but it's like, okay, I'm actually really enjoying our conversation. I'm sure the listeners are, and that makes it easier to lean in. If it's just heavy, right? Our normal conditioning is, oh, too big, too heavy. I don't know what to do. I got to back away. And to your point of back away, lean in, I can sense it. I'm leaning in. It's like, oh, I want to hear more from her. Not, oh, person going through grief must lean away. And so thank you for inviting us into this topic that is important for us to all be talking about, and we don't. So I'm curious, how did you get from survival and getting out of survival mode to this is actually my new life path and this is my new purpose? And were you actually, I don't know what you were doing before, were you a counselor or somehow in that coaching kind of field? Oh, okay. So if you could share what your career was before the loss and then how you made this whole new path for yourself, this whole new career purpose path.
Yeah. So right before Ben died, I had just finished my coaching training. So I had sort of embarked on that path. I worked in film and television. I worked on a long-running TV show for 9 seasons, which now is unheard of. So Ben died in season 7, right at the beginning of season 7. So I did 3 more seasons, like 7, 8, 9 on that same show. And that really was like a lot because film and TV is very demanding. You're working like 16, 18-hour days. And in grief, it was a lot. And so I ended up here because I realized really early that I was able to talk about it in a way that people could hear what I had to say. And I just had so much curiosity about how this worked and why this worked this way and how we could do better. I just feel so strongly that as a collective, we can do so much better. Because right now, really, we're kind of crap at the whole thing. Like, we're really not doing a very good job. So we really could do so much better. And so what then could my role in that be? And for me, that's another way of honoring my experience of loss was how can I use that to make your mess your mission? How can I use that to really change this paradigm where people are so isolated and we're all so scared and nobody knows what's coming and symptoms wise, even of grief, all the normal things that happen that you think all of a sudden something's wrong with you because nobody told you about them. Like, how do we break down this silence? Because we've all experienced grief, right? Everyone who's listened so far knows that whether they've lost a loved one or not, they've experienced grief. We've all learned that today. Excellent. So this is big. I mean, that's really big because we're not languaging it that way. I talk to people all the time who say, oh, well, I haven't had any grief. Like, I haven't lost a loved one. I'm like, have you lost a job? Did you ever move? Did you lose a pet? Did you get a crappy grade on a paper you thought you did really well on? That's all grief. Like, it's all there. It's everywhere in our lives, but we don't talk about it. So how could I be part of a movement that would change that? And what could I offer? And I knew that I had a really rich understanding of it just from my own lived experience, which is why that became my company name. And I also wanted some training. So I did a really brilliant grief educator program with David Kessler, who's a well-known, especially in North America, but really globally, grief expert. So I did the training with him because I thought I need something as a foundation of what other people's experiences were, because I was so deeply in touch with my own experience, and I wanted to know how much my experience translated to other people and how much was similar and how much was different. And that really has helped shape where I see so much commonality and then so much difference. So how do I help grievers grieve better? And how do I help the people around them do a better job? And because my goal really is culture change and paradigm shift, where does that happen the fastest was the next question. And that's at work. So that's why my work now is with organizations, with businesses who look at their absence, usually, of any kind of grief policy beyond 3 days off and a referral to the employee assistance program, and go, how do we build this into our systems? How do we provide support when people are coming back? Like if you have a return to work policy for someone who's injured and you have a whole protocol of adjusting their work and graduated reentry and flexible work hours and all the things, you need a similar program for grievers. Because we're all back at work because we mostly need to be financially, and we mostly choose to be because we want to touch normal every once in a while. Mm-hmm. And we have reduced capacity, we have brain fog, we have all the things. So how can we have that person show up and still feel seen, valued, understood, part of the team, and have them be successful at work? And it's not that difficult to do. And the ripple effect and the financial benefits and all the things, the more research that I do, the more it's very clear that unsupported grief in the workplace, the latest study I found from the CDC priced it at $225 billion a year.
Wow.
Was the cost in the US. That's massive for something we don't even understand is a problem and we're not talking about. We need to fix that.
Yeah.
The places where grief is a really big issue too are a lot of those frontline worker kind of positions, mm-hmm. right? In social services and healthcare, those kinds of places where grief is really embedded. Grief and loss is really a part of the job. And the fact that we're not supporting people in those kind of places is astonishing to me. And we're not. It's just kind of part of it. You're just supposed to pretend it didn't happen and keep on keeping on. And that's why we're seeing so much burnout.
Yeah. I have a sense almost that in our society, it's, well, you chose that position, right? You chose to be a nurse. You chose to be a doctor or whatever. You knew what you were getting into. So of course you can deal with it, and not really realizing that, there is this huge thing that they have to deal with, and they are still humans.
Yeah, because they're still a human being doing this job. They're not like an alien. They're not a superhero. They're just a human being trying to hold the unholdable.
So if I give you a magic wand and you can wave it over us and change our society and the world in the way that you want to do it, because it sounds like you have a big vision, what is that vision? I'll say it in the past tense. What have you created? I'm giving you that permission.
Ooh, I love it. Okay, so two things. I think to get where I want to get, we have to realize that so often we're operating out of fear. And instead of fear, we have to choose love. So once we have chosen love, like my cathedral project is that we would talk about grief as normally as we talk about what we watched on Netflix this weekend.
What is can you just clarify your cathedral project?
So a cathedral project is this idea that you have started a project that's probably not going to be complete in your lifetime. Okay. Because cathedrals took so long to build, like the architect would start this project and then they wouldn't live to see its completion. Mm-hmm. So the project that oh my gosh, wouldn't that be amazing? But probably will not happen in my lifetime, is that we would talk about it as normally as we talk about everything else. Mm-hmm. Oh, I didn't get that job and I'm feeling all the feels and this is what's going on for me, that we would just talk about it normally, that we would understand it. We would talk about it. We would share our experiences. We would learn from each other the same way that we do with a million other things. I share what I watched on Netflix and you care what I watched on Netflix because you want to know, was it any good? Would I be interested? Should I put it on my list? We're learning from each other all the time. Mm-hmm. So what if we shared, wow, I'm in the depths of it. Today, I managed to do my one hard thing and then just breathe. And that's what I'm celebrating today. What if we shared those things too? What if we shared, oh my gosh, my brain fog today? Outrageous. I could barely make a grilled cheese sandwich. My daughter tells a hilarious story of us trying to feed ourselves when we thought we should be able to feed ourselves. And it took us 45 minutes to make a grilled cheese sandwich. Wow. Nobody's telling us that.
Yeah.
45 minutes for a grilled cheese sandwich, 25 minutes to have a shower because you're standing under the water going, what do I do here? Oh, I shower. Okay. And if you don't think about showering, this is why I think we have our best ideas in the shower, because we're on muscle memory, right? We all have a system, whatever it is. Shampoo, conditioner, arms, body, legs, like we all have a system. And I would stand there going, did I wash my hair yet? I don't know. Am I supposed to be doing conditioner? Okay, let's put it back under the water. Is it squeaky or is it, oh, maybe I should wash it again. Everything that was easy is hard.
Yeah.
But we don't talk about it. So then when it happens to you, you think, not only have I lost my son, not only have I lost myself, now my life is a post-apocalyptic nightmare, and there is something wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with you. What's happening is normal. It's happened to somebody else, and they just didn't tell you.
Oh, I just want to give you a megaphone and lift you above the earth and have that message go out to everybody. Because we're talking about there are losses that you're probably experiencing on, I don't want to say a regular basis, but not as
on a regular basis. Yeah. Let's own it. Let's name it. Like if we're going to make this paradigm shift, we are experiencing grief and loss on a regular basis. It is a regular, normal, expected part of our life. Okay, carry on.
The only reason I was saying not regular is it's not necessarily every week. It's not to say that it's not regular. Yes, I will agree with you. It is much more common. And so, the idea if we can all hear, this is normal, this is okay, I can talk about it, I am okay. The fact that I am confused and hurt and swirling and unsure of how to get myself to move forward is perfectly okay, so that you don't get stuck in the, not only am I grieving, but now I'm feeling crappy about myself because I can't even process my grief.
Exactly. Yeah, you don't know how to do it because nobody taught you and nobody's talking about it, and we're all doing it in silos separately from each other. We have to change that. That's not helping. Yeah. That doesn't help anybody.
Yeah, I love your vision. I hope many, many people get on board with this and start to get behind it, and that we can change this because it really is so important. And it's something that we don't talk about. And I'm so thrilled that I brought you on this show and that you said yes, because it is absolutely part of a hell yes life. I agree with your definition. Hell yes doesn't mean that it's rainbows and butterflies. It means life happens. How are you going to respond to it? What do you do when these things show up in your life? You can't just, you can push through and assume it's all okay, but it's going to come crashing down on you at some point if you do that.
Yeah. And grief is patient, man. It will wait for you. If you're not ready to deal with it, it will wait for you. And the next little loss you have will feel gigantic. Or the next person you lose, you'll have lost multiple because you have all these other ones. Every time you have a loss, like all the other ones that you haven't dealt with yet come back too. So if you can deal with them as you go, I'm here to tell you it's much easier.
How do you feel like you have changed as a person after going through this?
I mean, so many ways. I completely lost the ability to pretend and to, do small talk. Ugh, who cares? I don't care. I just don't care anymore. So some of those societal niceties, I should probably pretend a little bit better. And then I also think it's part of a hell yes life. Hell yes to not pretending. Hell yes to no more facades. Hell yes to let's just be real. I can only imagine what that world would be like. It'd be so much better for me and all of us, really. So I really lost that ability to perform any of those roles. I was a really good daughter, good mother, good sister, good employee, all that stuff that we do. I didn't care about any of those roles anymore. I was still really good at all of them. That's not to say I gave up and just turned into crap. But I didn't want to pretend about it anymore. I became very much more clear at speaking my truth. And I literally did have to say to people, as you said earlier, I did have to say to people, I thought we had the kind of relationship that when the poop hit the fan, we would support each other, and the poop hit the fan and you disappeared. So now what? Now what? What does that mean about our relationship? I don't know. I'm curious about it because I don't know. So I got really clear about what I was prepared to put up with and what I wasn't. And it's an evolutionary thing, right? It's iterative. And I'm still a recovering people pleaser. And I own that. But I see it much more quickly. I see when I'm out of integrity. I see when I'm doing something that makes me uncomfortable, but I'm doing it anyway. And I'm like, nah, not so much doing that.
Wow, those are massive, really important changes. And I'm going to catch you on what you said earlier. I should be better at making small talk. Number one, I am anti-should. here.
Yeah. Don't let anyone shit on your life.
Exactly, including yourself, and especially shitting around small talk. No, I mean, maybe with like the cashier, fine. You don't need to tell them your whole life at a supermarket, but in any real connection, no, we don't need any of that nonsense. We need more people showing up like you, modeling this is real connection.
Yeah. And even with the cashier, I would push back on that a little bit. I actually think that the fact that the cashier says, "How are you?" is actually harmful. Because what we're doing as a collective is we're normalizing that asking about your feelings is a throwaway question to which you are expected to give a throwaway answer. So what if we took a pledge together that we were only going to ask, "How are you?" when we really cared, and we were only going to answer the truth?
Wow, I love that. Whew. Thanks for calling me on that.
Like the cashier should be saying, "Did you find everything you were looking for?"
Yeah.
This is a transactional relationship. This is not a personal relationship.
Yeah.
And if we're in personal relationship, let's only ask when we actually want to know. And let's only answer with the truth. That's how we start to talk about emotions. That's how we start to be able to name them. That's how we start to actually even pause long enough as we pass in the hallway. Have you noticed that we ask that question? We don't even stop. We don't even slow our footfall. How are you? Fine. Great. Me too. What? That's our North American version of an emotional conversation. It's just not healthy.
Wow. I mean, it's a small idea, and I feel like my brain just went like,
take the pledge, right? I need to put a little thing on my website where you could like take the pledge and we can start a movement. Like, how are you is a really deep, powerful question.
Yeah.
But we're conditioning it out of meaning.
Yeah. I need to think about what my greeting question is now. Or if I have enough time to really connect, then it's how are you feeling? What is your kind of casual, you're meeting somebody that, is not part of your life. You're not going to sit there and have an engaging discussion. What is your go-to question or way of, maybe it doesn't even have to be a question. Maybe it's a greeting and you don't even ask anything.
I don't even ask anything.
Okay.
I really don't, because if I don't have the time or bandwidth or the interest in the answer, I shouldn't ask the question. Because then we're just subtly invalidating each other all the time, and that's no help. So I'll just say hi.
Yeah.
Great to see you. Thanks for taking my order.
I feel like
if it's a transactional relationship, let's make it transactional.
Yeah.
And have a great day. Also terrible. Anytime people would say that to me, I would just want to say, you have no idea what my day is. And it's impossible for me to have a great day and shut up. Thanks for coming. Thanks for coming is a transactional conversation.
Yeah. I feel like you have 10 mics over there because you keep dropping them and it's like, damn. Unbelievable. I mean, these are, again, like these things that we do every day of our life and don't think about, and yet could make such a big difference if we did them differently. Wow.
Yeah. Baby steps make huge differences.
Yeah.
Well, and it's about that consciousness, right? Are we conscious? We're not even conscious. We don't even ask and answer that question with any level of consciousness. We're not even paying attention. Yeah. How are you? I'm fine. Oh, how are you? Great. Me too. Bye. That's an unconscious conversation.
Yeah.
Let's have conscious conversations. That's where we're going to change the world.
Absolutely. Well, I think you are absolutely magnificent. I am so glad that our paths have crossed. One of the things that I do on the show is I give everybody an opportunity to get their brag on, because I think women are not another societal change I'd like to see. Women are told to be humble and nice and shine the light on other people. And I want to give you the stage and the spotlight and the opportunity to brag about whatever you want to brag about. If it's something that's going on today, if overall in your life, whatever you want to talk about, we're here for you.
Wow. Oh, I love that. In Claire's organization, I was talking about Claire Zammit before. In our organization, we practice introducing ourselves with something we're great at and something on our growth edge, which I think is so brilliant, because you're exactly right. Especially as women, we're so not good at articulating what we're great at. I'm really great at talking about grief in a way that makes you want to lean in and makes you want to learn. I'm really great at curiosity and figuring things out and languaging things in a way that lets people understand something that before they couldn't even wrap their head around. I'm really great at looking at systems and seeing how we could change them. And I'm really passionate about all of that. And I will just present that I'm really great at doing a podcast from a hotel room at a conference with my suitcase as my lap desk, holding my laptop so the eye line isn't terrible while sitting on a bed.
Thank
Facing
you.
the window so the light is okay.
Yeah, we didn't acknowledge that. So Suzanne is actually being extraordinarily accommodating so that we could squeeze this in so that I can actually be present with my mom in a couple of weeks. And so I wanted to get this podcast done quickly so that I could have this conversation out in the world. I wish I would have mentioned that earlier. People that are listening don't know. People that are watching will be able to see the room that's been unmade. Yeah.
Because the place I'm staying at is marketing it as green housekeeping. So their version of green housekeeping is that the housekeepers don't come into your room. You too can do whatever you need to from
anywhere, right? So thank you.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for your time today. How can people get in touch with you?
The best way to get in touch with me is on my website, which is alivedexperience.com. There's 2 important things you can do there. You can sign up for the newsletter, which comes out semi-regularly. It was really regular, and then I broke my ankle and my wrist, which threw everything out of the works. Semi-regularly every second Friday, and just has whatever I'm learning. The new blog post, there's always in there, and podcasts I've been on. So that's a place to keep in touch with what I'm learning and putting out in the world. And if anything we've talked about sounds interesting to you, you can book into my calendar and we can have a conversation about how what I do could serve you and your organization.
Fantastic. Well, thank you once again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning in. I really appreciate you being here. That's it for this episode of Your Hell Yes Life. I hope it inspired you to keep trailblazing your unique path. I have some fantastic episodes coming up, so don't forget to subscribe. If you want to help spread the Hell Yes magic, share the podcast with your family and friends. Let's make this a movement. And remember, always be brave and true to your Hell Yes.